Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day to you. That's depending where you are in the world. We're here in London live doing the nighttime devotion from the Devotional Conflict and Courage by Ellen White. The title today, This Dropout Made Good. 2 Timothy 4 verse 11. Pick up Mark and bring him with you, for I find him a useful assistant. Mark's mother was a convert to the Christian religion, and her home at Jerusalem was an asylum for the disciples. Mark proposed to Paul and Barnabas that he should accompany them on their missionary tour. He felt the favour of God in his heart and longed to devote himself entirely to the work of the gospel ministry. Their way was toilsome. They encountered hardships and privations and were beset with dangers on every side. But Paul and Barnabas had learned to trust God's power to deliver. As faithful shepherds in search of the lost sheep, they gave no thought to their own ease and convenience. Forgetful of self, they faltered not when weary, hungry, and cold. They had in view but one object, the salvation of those who had wandered far from the fold. Mark, overwhelmed with fear and discouragement, wavered for a time in his purpose to give himself wholeheartedly to the Lord's work. Unused to hardships, he was disheartened by the perils and privations of the way. He had yet to learn to face danger and persecution and adversity with a brave heart. As the apostles advanced and still greater difficulties were apprehended, Mark was intimidated and, losing all courage, refused to go farther and return to Jerusalem. This desertion caused Paul to judge Mark unfavorably and even severely for a time. Barnabas, on the other hand, was inclined to excuse him because of his inexperience. He felt anxious that Mark should not abandon the ministry, for he saw in him qualifications that would fit him to be a useful worker for the Christ. In after years, his solicitude in Mark's behalf was richly rewarded, for the young man gave himself unreservedly to the Lord and to the work of proclaiming the gospel message in difficult fields. Under the blessing of God and the wise training of Barnabas, he developed into a valuable worker. Paul was afterward reconciled to Mark and received him as a fellow laborer. This dropout made good. So this is referring to Mark, who was very had the favour of God. He felt he had the favour of God. He had the fervour in his heart to go and help and be part of their ministry, to do what they did and to, walk the road that they were walking. But as is said here, he talked the talk, but he couldn't walk the walk. He became disheartened, discouraged. Because, there were times they were hungry, there were times they didn't have anywhere to sleep. And he wasn't accustomed to that. And Paul judged him unfavorably, as it says, severely at times. And that just shows that even as good as Paul was with his ministry and with preaching and converting the Gentiles, He was human just like you and me. He judged Mark severely, meaning he became intolerant, impatient, just like you and me. But Barnabas, who perhaps knew him better, I don't know, but certainly knew and recognized that he was more inexperienced. He hadn't experienced all what they had experienced already before. They knew what to expect, they knew how to deal with it. He didn't. And Barnabas gave him more benefit of the doubt. They let him go home. They let him go and obviously keep warm and eat and do all that they do when they're at home instead of being out on the road ill-equipped, so to speak. But ultimately, because of, well, I can't say because of Barnabas, but thanks to Barnabas as well, ultimately, Mark completely gave his heart to God, gave himself, and reconciled with Paul, back with Paul ultimately as well, which was really good. And what we always need to recognize that we do falter, we do become ill-disciplined, impatient, intolerant with others. We do. It's natural. Sometimes we're overtired, sometimes we're just hungry. But we need to recognize that. Recognize when we do that. Recognize when we're being like that. And we deal with someone differently again. We apologize. Humble yourself. Humble ourselves. And be who God created us to be, to love one another as He loves us. Be patient. Be tolerant. Be humble. Be low. Be meek and lowly. And love each other.